It's 8 o'clock, so hi everyone, anyone who's already logged in. I think we need to give people some time to get themselves seated, hopefully with a glass of wine. In the meantime, I'm Joanna Buckley and I'm going to talk tonight about my debut novel, Lily Harford's Last Request. So welcome to those who are already in. And if we just give some other people some time to also join in. Okay, someone's already in. Lovely. Welcome. Maybe while people are just settling in and getting themselves comfortable, I'll just give you a little bit of background on me for those who are already watching. So I live in Melbourne, in Surrey Hills in Melbourne, and I've a part-time careers counsellor in a school. So writing is not a full-time thing for me, although I would love it to be, and maybe down the track it will be. I have 3 children in their 20s, the youngest still at home, and I have a dog who's sitting down beside me and is actually being very distracting, but that's okay. And I have a cat who's never around, so I won't even try to find him to show him to you. Hi Sabine from Inverloch. Christine, thank you. That's a lovely comment that you can't wait to read my book. Hi, Wendy from Wagga. This is so exciting. People from all over the place. Love it. Hi, Meredith. She says, hi, Joanna. I love the cover of your book and I can't wait to read your novel. It is a beautiful cover, isn't it? And the team at HarperCollins, the design team, were just amazing in coming up with that. And I am getting lots of comments about the cover, so I'm really, really pleased. This is the awkward time, you know, when people are still coming into this, so we just have to wait a little bit, I think. Vicky from Queensland. Hi, Vicky. The book is set in Queensland. If you've read it, you might know that, in the south of Queensland. All right, well, I think I also have a dog sharing with me, says Wendy. I'd love to show you Leo, but he's a Nova Scotia duck-tolling retriever, just a bit of a mouthful. So he's the size of a border collie and he's a little bit big for me to pick up and put on my lap, but he is at my feet. Leo, if someone wants to see you. Oh, no, it's not. I know it won't work. He's too comfortable. All right, well, look, I might start. So thank you, everyone, for being here, for taking time out of your evenings to share, 30 minutes with me and my book. Thank you to Better Reading for giving me this opportunity. I'm just blown away. When you're a first-time author, you're like a deer in the headlights, and it's also wonderful and exciting, and I still have to pinch myself that I'm in this position. So my book, put on that side, Lily Harford's Last Request. It came out on a great date, the 2nd of the 2nd of 22. So that's something I've been looking forward to for quite a while, and it was really exciting when it came out. So I thought what I'd do is, first of all, just talk about the story, give you a bit of background for those who haven't read it, and then a little bit about the inspiration for the book, so why I wrote it, what the character, who the characters are based on, and that sort of thing. If I've got time, I'll read just a page and a half, a little extract from it, and of course answer your questions. So I'm going to have to get used to scrolling and looking for the questions. So Lily Harford's Last Request. It's set in the early 2000s, and it's set in a coastal town, a small coastal town in southern Queensland. And there are 3 characters in the book, 3 women whose stories are woven into each other, and it covers about an 18-month period of time. So the main character is Lily Harford. She's 86. and she's got early dementia, and she's had to go into a nursing home. So she's lived in her same Queenslander house for over 50 years. She's raised her daughter there, and now she's had to go into a nursing home because her memory's letting her down so badly, and her body's letting her down as well. There's the second character is Pauline, who is her daughter, who's in her mid-50s. And the third character is a nurse aide at the nursing home that Lily has gone into, and her name is Donna, and she's 39 in the story. So, as the title suggests, Lily has a last request, and that is that she wants to die on her own terms. Her father died of dementia, and it wasn't a good death at all, and it was very traumatic for her as his daughter, and she's terrified of going the same way as her father. And what we learn in her chapters, there are flashbacks. So it's kind of like peeling back the layers of Lily and learning about her not just as a woman frozen in time, as an 86-year-old, but as someone who's been young and had all of these events happen in her life. And in her mind, all those younger versions are still in her, they're part of her. So if you saw her on the street, you'd just see an elderly woman. But through these flashbacks, I was trying to kind of flesh her out to be the sum of all of those ages that she's been. And we learn through those flashbacks that she was really quite a trailblazer. She was a teenager in the Depression, and of course that shaped her very much. She lived through the Second World War. She suffered grief and loss, and she had to be quite strong. She actually has a child. It's not really too much of a spoiler to say she has a child out of wedlock, because we know she has a daughter, Pauline. But that was in the 1950s and the 1960s, and the stigma and the prejudice at that time would have been enormous. But she held her head up high, and she raised Pauline on her own. And of course, she had to support herself and her daughter. And at a time when few women had done this, she had a degree in accounting, and she opened up an accounting business in this town called Finn Bay in the book, and ran that business. And of course, it was very much, you're talking about the 50s, 60s, 70s, very much a man's world, that world of business. And again, there were prejudices that she had to battle against. So these flashbacks are showing these events in her life, and we quickly realise that Lily Harford is capable, and she's strong, and she's independent. And so her request now at the end of her life, when dementia has come knocking on the door, that terrifies her, it's kind of no surprise that she wants to end her life the way she wants to. She wants to have control. And, it's her quest to find someone to help her to do that. The second character is Pauline, her daughter. Very much, the apple didn't fall far from that tree. She's a very strong woman, very capable as well, and they're very close. They've been, a team of two all this time. But Pauline, in her mid-50s, is really overwhelmed. She's dealing with her mum, who's her rock, deteriorating in front of her eyes. She feels very guilty that her mum's had to go into a nursing home. She feels very sad at her demise. And she's dealing with a professional role. She's a principal in a school. She has a husband who challenges her in some ways. She has a daughter, and she has two granddaughters, and she wants to be there for everyone, and she's struggling. And the thing is, because she's actually struggling with the idea that she's struggling, she doesn't like this at all, this weakness in herself. And the third character is Donna. So Donna is actually new to Finn Bay. She's had a really tough upbringing, a really dysfunctional family. She got married thinking that she would find some self-confidence through the marriage, but in fact that didn't work out, and kind of her confidence is really in shreds at the end of that. So she's come to Finn Bay. She's kind of reinvented herself, trained to be a nursing aide. She gets a job in Finn Bay, and her self-confidence is building again, and her sense of self-worth. And she and Lily form quite a bond. She sees Lily as a grandmother, and So when Lily then turns to Donna, as someone who she feels has access to drugs and things like that, that can, you know, she can take to end her life, this is really challenging for Donna because she feels, well, I can't do that. I'd lose my job. I'd go to jail. And suddenly all this strength that she's sort of been trying to build up in the last few years is going again. She just feels really weak and useless. So the book, it's based on end of life issues, but and I've got to say it has a very confronting opening scene. But it's also very much about life's joys. It's about relationships, whether they're familial or, you know, friendships or intimate relationships. It's about women's inner lives and the challenges that, you know, we perennially seem to face. So aging and sexism and the motherhood and, you know, juggling all of those roles. For that reason, there's actually book club questions in the back. The publishers thought that it made such a good book club novel that the question should actually be in the back. So if you're a member of a book club or know someone is, you might want to recommend the book for that. Perhaps I should just look at some questions now and just see if there's anything that people are asking at this stage. Okay, so Wendy asks, do I have first-hand experience with people with dementia? Wendy, that is such a nice segue because the next thing I was going to do was talk about my inspiration for the book. Yes, I do, in my family. The whole thing of assisted dying and dementia has been floating around in my family literally for decades. So my grandfather, and I come prepared, there is a photo of my grandfather, Harry Buckley. He was just a beautiful man. My memory of Grandpa is three-piece suit and a hat, which I'm sure he didn't wear all the time, but that's how I remember him. He was just such a good man, a gentle man, and he was married to my grandmother, Doris, for 60 years. They had a very happy life. He did a lot of voluntary work as well as being a chartered accountant, like Lily in the book. And he, but unfortunately, in his sort of mid-80s, his memory really started to let him down. And he actually ended up spending 5 years in a nursing home. Now, this is the mid to late 70s. We're talking about the late 70s. And I visited him when I was a teenager. I think it was 14 or 15. And I walked into this nursing home and I walked into his room and there was Grandpa sitting in a chair sort of like this, but his arms were strapped to the arms of the chair. His hands were strapped at the wrists. And it was just horrible. And it's because he had a tendency to wander. And so they had to, you know, tie him down basically. And he also didn't recognise Granny, you know, can you imagine that after more than 60 years that you don't recognise your wife? So that was traumatic for me, and it was traumatic for his son, my father. And I've also got a picture of my dad. Where's Dad? He was a great guy. And Dad swore from that moment on, he said, if that happens to me, if my memory goes like my father, I'm going to take a pill. And Dad joined the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, which is now called Dying with Dignity, which you may have heard of. And, you know, if I had $1 for every time Dad had said, I'll take a pill if I go like that, I'd be a really rich woman by now. And Dad, like his father, had a lucky life. He considered himself really lucky. He'd survived polio as a child. He'd survived the Second World War on a Navy ship, you know, avoiding submarines. He'd met my mum and they had a wonderful marriage and 5 children. And he was just a really practical, philosophical, optimistic man. He was my rock, that's for sure. And he'd also, like his father, worked as an accountant and done a lot of voluntary work. And in fact, the two of them received honours. Like my grandfather in 1953 got an OBE and Dad received honours as well because they had done so much. So in his late 80s, guess what? Yeah, his memory started to go. And he could see the writing on the wall. He went into a nursing home eventually, and it was just, gosh, it all came back to me. You know, I'd visit Dad, and he wasn't as bad as Grandpa had got to. He was still with it enough to, you know, have conversations, but he just looked so dejected. And he was really, you know, ramping up the requests of his children to help him pass away, because he could see the writing on the wall, and he didn't want to end up like the really, you know, gone patients there at this nursing home. And luckily, he got pneumonia 7 weeks after he arrived at the nursing home. He got taken to hospital. He made his wishes clear. His wishes had been written down anyway, and bless the doctors, they, instead of giving him antibiotics for pneumonia, they gave him morphine. And less than 2 days later, he passed away. And we were, his children were around the bed, and we could tell him what a wonderful dad he was and how much we loved him. And honestly, it was a good death. As deaths go, it was a good death. And it was what he wanted. It was a good death because that's what he wanted. So, Wendy, that was a really long answer to your question of my experience with dementia and with assisted dying. And I think that when I decided I wanted to write a book, that this whole concept of end-of-life wishes and ageing really came to me very quickly. But I also, of course, wanted to talk about women's issues and things as well. So now, what other questions have we got? I think, Reggie, thank you. What inspired you to write the story? I hopefully covered that one. May I ask what author inspires you, and also what novel? Thanks, Louise, for that question. Look, no particular author and no particular novel. I just... I didn't do a lot of reading as a child or a teenager. I mean, your normal amount, but I wasn't, you know, a bookworm. But in the last 10 years, I've really got into reading, and I started a book club with my friends. And it's the classic thing of a good story well told. So things like Georgia Blaine, Between a Wolf and a Dog, Where the Crawdads Sing, you know, just beautifully written books are what inspire me, and I want to write as well as they do. I probably never will, but that's what I would like to do. Hi, Bronwyn from the Sunshine Coast. Hello back. Kylie says, hi, Joanna. I had my nan die of dementia 1 year ago. I'm sorry, Kylie, to hear that. I look forward to reading your book. What inspired you to be an author? Okay, so... again, like going back, I didn't always want to be a writer. In fact, I associated writing with university and essays, pretty negative connotations. I did write poetry as a teenager, very angst-ridden poetry. I wanted to be the next Jane Goodall, actually, when I was at uni. I studied zoology. But look, through my work life, I tended to gravitate to the writing task within every job I had. And it was in about 2013, I don't know why, I just saw this ad from my local library to enter a short story competition. I thought, okay. And I did that a couple of times with a couple of short stories, and I didn't get anywhere, but I absolutely loved it, as in that thing of, you know, when you're in flow and time is just going so fast, right? Like you just know you've found your passion. And the kids would complain because I hadn't made dinner. I didn't realise, you know, 3 hours had passed when I thought it was just 30 minutes. So it then became my bucket list, I think somewhere in the sort of the mid-teens, to write a book. Never thought I'd get published, didn't even think I'd try to get published, because I knew how hard that was. And it sounds really corny, but Kylie, I just wanted to have something that my kids were proud of. I wanted a legacy. It was just a bucket list item that I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I was starting to go to workshops and things to try and polish the manuscript, and I was having nice feedback from people running those workshops, and I thought, well, maybe I should try. Maybe I should try and get it published. And here I am. I can actually call myself an author, which is very cool. Hi, Nicola. Nicola says, the story is so deeply positive about life while squarely facing the issue of death. how did you achieve this? Gosh, Nicola. Well, I think it just goes back to what I was saying about not just making it about her quest to die, but about Lily's life and all the wonderful things in that life and her relationship with her daughter and her successes and her lovely parents that, there's a chapter where she's telling them that she's pregnant and their reactions and all Donna's, her friendship. Donna has a lovely friendship with someone outside the nursing home. And, it's just, I suppose I needed to counter such a heavy topic with all of those things, but it's about life, isn't it? Death is part of life and all these other things are part of life. So, yeah, I think it's a topic that death and certainly assisted dying is a topic that a lot of people are very uncomfortable talking about, and understandably so, but it's a really important topic. We're all going to get to the end of our lives, and some of us will be lucky in how that looks, and some of us will face something like Lily is with dementia. And I think it's important that families, loved ones have those conversations, and that, whether that's around the table or whether it's with, people at work at the water cooler and just, having a chat, or in book club. So I think I've got off topic there. I'm sorry, but that's just my little plug for the fact I think it's such an important topic. Reggie, do you have ideas or plans to write another book? I do. I've written about half of the first draft of my second novel. I probably won't say now what it's about, just that it's, again, it's got, the main character is a woman who's facing, she needs to heal from something that happens in her life. And but it also does raise another important, I think, social issue, but I won't reveal that yet. Margaret, looking forward to reading this book. Thanks for sharing your family story. Well done on getting published. Thank you, Margaret. That's lovely. I thought if everyone will, indulge me, I might just read a page and a half out of the book. Now, for those of you who've read it, I'm sorry, so you've heard this, but for those of you who haven't, I just wanted to give you a taste of the book. So it's, how are we going for time? 7:20, 8:23. Okay, this will only take a few minutes, and then if there's some more questions, I'll take them. So this is a part of the book after Lily agrees reluctantly to go into a nursing home. Her home has been sold, this beautiful Queenslander home that she's spent, most of her life in, and it's been a very hot, humid day. The family have all been a bit grumpy, but they've tried to sort of sit with Lily through the afternoon and go through all the possessions in her house and work out what she's going to take to the nursing home, what she's going to, give to her family or give to charity. And it's the end of the day, and they're all tired, and her daughter and her daughter's husband, so Pauline and Sam, have just driven off, and Lily is left on her own in the house. It feels like the calm before a storm, because in only a few days, my life will be turned on its head. I climb back up my front steps and return inside, detecting as I enter the hallway a subtle difference in the sound of my footsteps. With pieces of furniture shifted around, some items gone, and all these cartons, it's altered King Street's familiar echo. The house seems to understand and to have infused my grief into its foundations, taking on a forlorn persona in sympathy and comradeship. It's lost its usual warmth and familiarity, but still, I can't imagine being anywhere else. I have an overpowering need to go into every part of my home to say my goodbyes, to carefully gather into myself one strong and enduring memory for each room. Limping my tired and bowed frame, I weave my way through piles of boxes, each marked with Charity, Pauline, or Rachel and Christos in thick black texture. I walk first into the bathroom, and there's Pauline, spotty from head to toe with chickenpox sores, marinating in a mix of water and baking soda to help relieve the itches. She looks up at me and says with such positivity, "At least they're pink, Mummy. I do love pink." To Pauline's old room next, where she rushes in, exclaiming, "Mum, guess what? I won the history prize at school." And we bounce together on her bed, laughing and whooping. To the kitchen, where my parents visit. Pauline is still a baby. Pa sits at the table, a soldering iron in one hand, as he fixes my radio, displaying his usual patience. With loving instruction, Ma shows me how to make meringue, her strength of purpose and motherly guidance buoying me at a time when I'm so full of uncertainties as a single mother. She expertly measures beats and spoons as I keep one ear open for the grumbles that will let me know Pauline's nap is over. In the dining room, it's 20 years ago. My cedar sideboard has just been delivered. It's richly patterned grained, so lovely. Who'd have thought a Havisham Road girl who grew up in second-hand clothes in a house with peeling paint and a rust-ridden leaking roof could have risen to afford a home like this with furniture as handsome as that. Finally, across the hall to my bedroom. Although he never knew this room or this house, Robert tries to appear, but I block him and retreat. The recollections of the two of us entwined are too soaked with pain. It's still light outside, but only just. Memories harvested and bundled tight. I return to the front door to check it's locked. Placing the flat of my hand on its upper panel in a kind of salute, I close my eyes and lean in, resting my forehead on its faithful timber. "Forgive me for abandoning you," I breathe into it. For a long time I can't sleep, having realised with dismay that I forgot to collect a memory from the back garden. How I will miss having my own plot of soil and the satisfaction it has brought me over the decades. Planting and pruning, tilling and feeding, watering and simply watching its pretty displays grow and wither over the seasons. I toss around with an agitation I haven't experienced since the period after Robert passed, when our bed in Rorook became as vast and cold and lonely as the Antarctic. I finally drift off, but only by imagining that the whoosh of the fan is the sound of the bays, winds and waves as I let the water swallow me. So thank you for letting me read that to you. So I will now, we've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly go back and see if there's any questions. Margaret, looking forward to reading this book. Thanks for sharing your family story. Well done on getting published. Kylie, congratulations. Christine, thank you, Christine, for your comment. Kylie, I bought your book. I just need to read it soon, yeah. And Tess, can't wait to read your book. I'm 80 now. Congratulations, Tess. Another Kylie, when my nan became sick, she had to leave everything she knew behind and move into a nursing home. It was hard emptying the family home and leaving it behind. But she knew it was in her best interest to leave. It was sad to see her struggle with dementia. Thank you, Therese. Thank you, Wendy. Sounds very interesting with the combination of a number of confronting topics along with easier life issues. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for better reading. If you like the sound of my book, yeah, please go get it and tell your friends. And as I said, it's a really great, it's got a lot of fodder in it for a book club discussion. So hopefully that will also be helpful to readers. So thank you and have a great night, everyone. Okay, bye.